as an interim trail. And the idea about this public art experience is to make art accessible to everyone. You don't have to go to a museum. You don't have to buy a ticket. It's out there for you to see as you walk or ride by on your bike. It's a linear gallery. It has artists from across Atlanta, the nation, the world, all kinds of mediums: sculpture, murals, dance, music, theater, just everything. And there is a year-round public art collection that is out all the time. And then there are temporary exhibitions that are added that may not be the type of thing to stand up to the elements for more than a few months at a time. And those temporary exhibitions are designed to engage the community. Now, healthy living is another one of those key features on the Beltline. And the Beltline considers itself not only investing in Atlanta, but investing in the health of Atlanta citizenry. And they do that by building the parks, trails, transit, improved streetscapes that encourage people to not use their cars, but to get out and walk, run, bike, skate, rather than drive. And the fewer of us who are driving to place, that helps improve air quality. The Beltline is building spaces for urban agriculture, and we'll see pictures of one of those next week. They're driving economic development that leads to new grocery stores in low-income neighborhoods and providing increased access to transit in those neighborhoods, and remediating brownfields, cleaning up the dirt, like that lime that Peggy has been talking about having taken out. That helps protect public health. Now, this is a picture of one of the early 5K walk runs that was established by the Atlanta Beltline Partnership. And I believe this picture is, it's not the north side trail. This must be the west side. And then this picture is something new. If you're looking for a great way to exercise during this time of social distancing, the Atlanta Beltline Partnership brings its largest free fitness program to you virtually. You can check out videos of free yoga classes, free exercise classes. This is a picture from one of the videos from one of the exercise classes. And let me tell you how to get to this. So if you have a pencil and paper, you can jot it down, but it's fairly easy to find on the Beltline website. You go to www.beltline, all one word, .org. And when you get there, you click on the menu at the top of the page where it says things to do. And then a menu will come up that will say health and fitness, and then another one that says free fitness. And you just click through those things to do, health and fitness, health and wellness, and free fitness. And that will take you to a list of the free exercise videos that you can do at home virtually. Now, community engagement is very important, and I would encourage you to read the words on the slide because I think they're very important. There is a comprehensive community engagement framework in place to ensure that residents have ongoing input into how the Beltline is implemented. And there are lots of meetings and events that you can go to participate. Atlanta Beltline Inc. plans and oversees and leads study groups. This is a study group. Quarterly briefings. This is a quarterly briefing picture. Neighborhood and citywide conversations. Pop-up events. Meet and greets, often in conjunction with local community events, and resident roundtables, even though these tables are rectangular rather than round, to allow Beltline staff to hear big and small ideas directly from community members. And they report out on what is in the works in terms of plans, and they ask community residents to participate by using stickers and sticky notes to say what they think of this particular plan, that particular amenity in a park, this way of doing the trail. To date, there have been over 350 public meetings with a total of 13,763 people attending. The ABI, as small as they are with just 45 people, they have staff on staff that are dedicated to managing all of these activities. And the Beltline Partnership, as you know, takes people on 3-hour bus tours prior to the pandemic. And so far, they've taken approximately 40,000 people, 30 at a time, on those bus tours since 2007. Now, Peggy, I had sent you a poll. Now is the time. This is asking you if you've participated in any of these things.
You sent me a poll?
Yes, I did.
Okay, hang on.
That's quite all right. Well, I didn't create the poll because the host has to do that.
I know. I'm sorry. I don't think I got a poll, Lucy.
Well, that's okay. Don't worry about it. How about if we
let's do a raise your hand thing.
That's a good idea.
Because it's a small enough group. I think we can do that.
Yeah, I think we can too. Whoops. There we go. What we're asking is, have you participated in any of these things? So how about if I read it out and you raise your hand if you've participated? And I'm going to raise my hand on the screen. The Lantern Parade. Okay. Art on the Beltline. Okay. Free fitness programs on the Beltline. Anybody?
No, but I will now.
Okay. Anybody been to any of the 355 public meetings so far? I haven't been to all of them, but I bet I've been to at least the 55. A bus tour of the Beltline?
Now most of you should have your hand up on that one because we took it with each other ourselves.
Okay. A walking tour of the Beltline Arboretum by Trees Atlanta.
I haven't done that.
Hopefully they'll start those back up after the pandemic, and you can take bicycle tours of the Beltline. That's one I've never done and probably won't. Okay, so now that we've looked at the kinds of things that we can participate in, we're going to talk about how much this is going to cost. And there are lots of numbers on the next 2 slides, but hopefully they're not too hard to read. These are estimates from the Beltline Strategic Implementation Plan that was published in December 2013. But all of the estimates were figured with an inflation factor for whatever it was going to take to get something finished by 2030. So these are not 2013 numbers in terms of the costs. They were published in 2013, but they do include an inflation factor. And you'll see that the thing that's going to cost the most money is transit. That's expected to cost 52% of the total cost of everything in the project, between $2 and $2.5 billion. And that's for light rail. And Tony, that thing you saw in the paper announced today, also estimates about $2.5 billion to finish the light rail. Now, parks are going to cost about 13% of the total cost, or about $500 million. The streetscapes, all those streets that they're going to try to improve for pedestrians and bicycles, is going to cost 8%. But we'll see where the money is coming from. That's not coming from the Beltline as much as it is the feds, the state, and local governments to the Beltline for that. Affordable housing is going to cost about 7% at over $300 million. The trails, this is at $246 million, but that doesn't include everything that it cost to buy the land from the railroads. That is spread out among the parks, the transit, the trails. So you might see later in the presentation that it's going to cost more than that for trails, but that's because they lumped everything in on trails in that slide, where they did not in this slide. I'm sorry, this is getting away from me again. Okay, pilot payments. Let me explain what those are. Those are payments in lieu of taxes. And the two government entities that get that 5% of the total cost in lieu of property taxes are Fulton County and the Atlanta Public Schools. They both agreed to wait until they get a lot of the property taxes for the redevelopment that goes on around the Beltline over the 25 years, but they didn't agree to get nothing of the new taxes. So there is an agreement signed between Fulton County and the city of Atlanta, and an agreement with Atlanta Public Schools. And each of those entities get some tax money, new tax money every year. And that's going to be about 5% of the total cost. Of course, they have to pay debt repayment for any bonds that are left that have to be paid back at 4%. And the Atlanta Beltline operating costs are going to be at 4%. And they anticipate an economic development incentive fund at 2%, adding up to about $4.5 billion. And that doesn't include the money that was spent before 2013. So if you include the earlier figures that were spent in the first 5, 6, 7 years, it rounds up to almost $5 billion. Now, that's really a lot of money. Where in the world are we going to get the money to do all of that? Here are the estimates in the strategic plan, that same document that the previous slide information came from. The sources of funds are expected to be the tax allocation district, the TAD that we talked about, at 33%. In the beginning, when they first set up the redevelopment plan, they were expecting more like 75% to come from the TAD. But the TAD has had reasons that much less is coming in. Federal funds, they're estimating that they will try to get about 29% in money from the federal government, both for transit, trails, environmental cleanup, water cleanup, all kinds of different federal grants that are available. Local funding for parks is going to be estimated to be about $157 million, and that's 4%. And that's to come in over 25 years. And the Atlanta Parks Department is a very big partner on developing the parks for the Beltline. Private funds are estimated to be 6% or $275 million. And that's a huge amount, but a very large amount of money has already been brought in private funds, somewhere between 50 and 100 million already. Now, it says unidentified, and everybody, when this was published, was really worried about this unidentified category because it's nearly $900 million or 20% of the total cost. And everybody said, what do you mean it's unidentified? And the answer was because they're over 25 years, there are going to be opportunities for funding that none of us ever imagined. And we will go after it as soon as something becomes available. So the Belt ABI is very opportunistic. When they see an opportunity to go after money that they weren't expecting, they go after it with a vengeance. And here is an example of that. There became a new source of funding as of April 1st, 2017, because in November of 2016, the City of Atlanta voters voted to increase our sales tax that goes to MARTA from the City of Atlanta by half of a penny. And that half a penny from over 40 years, which is the life of that tax, that half a penny plus 50% federal match is estimated that it will bring in $1.2 billion, which is about half of what the estimate was that we need for all of the transit. So it doesn't get us everything, but it does get us close to half. Now, later on, I'm going to talk about another new funding source that I've created another slide for and didn't put it on this slide because it was just announced last week. And here it is. How will the Beltline be funded? On January 19th, last week, legislation for a special service district was introduced at the Atlanta City Council. And what a special services district does is that the commercial and multifamily property owners in the planning area, that half mile on either side of the Beltline corridor that I showed you on the maps, that gray area, that is 19% of the city's land, that planning area, the commercial and multifamily property owners use the SSD to invest in the construction of the Beltline through a slight increase in their millage rate. And this is proposed in order to be able to get the $350 million needed to complete all the trails before 2030. And without the additional funding, they are estimating that the trail corridor would not be completed when the TAD expires in 2030. And the reason for that, in the first 3 years of the TAD, it could not be implemented because an Atlanta attorney sued. He's somebody who thinks TADs are a bad idea. And he tied the Beltline up in court, the TAD for the Beltline, for 3 years before that got worked out and it became clear that a TAD was legal for this. And right about that time, the Great Recession hit and construction stopped all over town. Our real estate market just tanked, and that caused the TAD to generate less than was expected. And right now, it's expected to generate at least $1 billion less than was originally projected. That's why it went down from 75% of the total cost to 33% of the total cost. Now, residents living in single-family homes near the Beltline, like me, won't be part of the special services district like Peggy. It will
Yep.
not increase our property taxes. It will only increase for commercial and multifamily owners.
Like the Gigundo development across the street from me that they're going to make a cajillion billion dollars on.
Yeah, like Pont City Market that they're making a lot of money on. Now, almost half of those commercial and multifamily parcels would pay less than an additional $250 annually. Now, I have also read that there will be 82% of the commercial and multifamily parcels will pay less than $1,000 extra annually. So it's those 18% of the biggest property owners that are making the most money off of being near the Beltline that are going to pay the biggest amount of tax increase. And I'd be almost willing to bet. I know they've been working on setting up this SSD for several years. And I think the Atlanta Beltline Partnership has probably got agreement with all of those big property owners, commercial and multifamily, that 18% who are going to pay more than $1,000. I think they've already gotten them on board to agree to this, or I don't think it would have been introduced at Atlanta City Council. And the mayor is on board. So it's expected to pass. And it's going to unlock money. It's going to unlock $350 million for trail completion. And what they'll do is this year, they'll go ahead and let bonds against this SSD future taxes coming in. And they'll use those bonds funds to go ahead and greatly increase the timeline for building the trails. There'll also, that will free up an additional $50 million for affordable housing, $12.5 million for a community retention fund to help keep legacy long-term residents in their homes around the Beltline, $150 million in construction funding that will go, that will be allocated to minority-owned contractors, $7 million in additional support for small businesses, and they're expecting it to help create an additional 20,000 permanent jobs. We talked about how many permanent jobs the goal is, and it's 30,000, and we're doing very well on that goal. Actually, we're above the goal, and they're expecting the total will now be 50,000. So that is a new way of funding things. Now, let's look at the implementation plan report. This is going to tell us how things have been going in the first phase or period of that strategic implementation plan. And this TADAC is the Tax Allocation District Advisory Committee. And that is a group of community people appointed to this committee. One of the purposes of the group is to monitor the effective and equitable implementation of the Beltline plan. And I'm on that group. We're having a 4-hour virtual business meeting Saturday morning from 8:30 to 12:30.
Oh, good Lord.
I know, I can't say that I'm real excited about it. But one of the good things that we have done is to create a performance report, because one of the things that I loved about this strategic implementation plan is that it told you what was going to be built, where it was going to be built, when it was estimated to be built, how much they thought it was going to cost, and where they thought they were going to get the money for it. So it answered all of those important questions. And it divided up from 2014 to 2030 into 3 different periods. And the first period was 2014 to 2018, period 1. So we reviewed to assess overall investment, buying the corridor, the projects, the action plans, the special targets like goals for affordable housing. And we assessed if the performance was, if they were complete, if it was on schedule, near schedule, somewhat near, behind, or far behind. And the measures we used were things like dollars spent, miles, current project phase, whether something was open when they planned for it to be open, or was it behind? It wasn't open yet, but it was under construction, so it was only 1 phase behind. Or if it was still in planning and acquisition and it was supposed to be open, it's 3 phases behind. And so now we're going to look at the report. The first thing to point out is that in the 5 years, FY14 through 18, the estimate was that the Beltline needed to invest $926 million, which makes sense if the whole thing is going to cost almost $5 billion. Far behind schedule. During that 5 years, approximately $194 million was invested. That's only 21% of what was needed. However, as terrible as that sounds, we're going to see in the rest of the report that they took a lot of opportunities and invested what they did have very wisely, because things have been completed, things are on schedule. Other things are not complete and not on schedule, and we'll lay those out. For corridor control, we own it all. 33.6 miles, so it's actually a little over. We own everything we need for building the trail. For the transit, we own 80% of what's needed for building the transit. And the reason we don't own the other 20% is that freight rail up in Northwest Atlanta is still using the corridor. And it's going to require that we get easements from the freight rail owners for transit access. But it's already been figured out. Those rails up there in Northwest Atlanta around Inman Yard and another big freight rail yard, those corridors are plenty wide enough for us to be able to negotiate easements and put in light rail along with the heavy freight rail. Now, in that 20% of the corridor, the walking, biking, jogging trails won't be in the corridor. They'll be in the nearby neighborhoods, because it wouldn't be safe to have the walking trail next to heavy freight rail. But we're doing well on corridor control. Now let's look at what was supposed to open by the end of 2018. And I'm going to start with what did open. 3 miles of the West Side Trail opened in 2017.
Right.
They completed the south extension of the East Side Trail from Irwin Street to Kirkwood in 2017. They completed Edgewood to DeKalb Avenue by 2019, just 2 months after. And they were near schedule on Kirkwood to Memorial, and that is open now. So all of the East Side Trail South extension is open. Now, so we're doing pretty well on trails. Not as well on parks. Boulevard Crossing Park, which is very near Peggy, is behind schedule, 2 phases behind. This says it's in active procurement with funding for design, because that's where it was when we did the review. But that procurement didn't go through, and they are 99.5% finished with the design, but they don't have the money to build it yet. And I'm hopeful that with that SSD we just talked about, that if they get extra money from that to build the trails, that we'll be able to use some of the rest to finish out some of these parks that we don't have the money for. West Side Park at Bellwood Quarry, phase 1, is actually somewhat near schedule. That is a big park that is being developed around the old Bellwood Granite Quarry that will be a 45-acre water reservoir for the city of Atlanta. Now, it's near schedule because the city of Atlanta has been working on opening up about 50 acres of 280 acres of that park. And it was supposed to open last year, but because of the pandemic, they have not opened that park. And I'm hopeful that it will open later this year, or if not late this year, certainly by next year. Now, this park is behind schedule. It was 2 phases behind when we did this review, but it's now only 1 phase behind. And the only thing that we lack is the money. Murphy Crossing is far behind schedule, but there is a request for proposals that it is in development right now, being finalized by ABI and Invest Atlanta. And they are expecting to go out for a provider to be ready to build that park when the money, and when I say park, a private provider is going to be building out 20 acres. We're going to talk more about that when we get to the parks. But the RFP includes either a park or green space, and we'll see what the provider who wins the bid says they're going to do in terms of green space. Now, we're far behind schedule on streetscapes. And that's because the federal government, the state government, and local government have not put money into improving streets for pedestrians and bike riders much recently. We're at 13.9% of projection. And one of the places you might have noticed that some work has been done is on Ponce de Leon Avenue, near the big developments that are there. Okay, what was supposed to be in construction by 2018, Tony, was transit. And that has not happened. We are definitely behind schedule. The 2 places that it's to go in first are along the East Side Trail and along the West Side Trail, because those trails are complete. The corridor work is complete. But even though we're behind, we have, for the East Side Trail, full local funding because of that 1/2 cent sales tax increase. But the money goes to MARTA, not the Beltline. And MARTA will take the money and make the decisions and the planning. So as of 2017, transit on the Beltline basically got turned over to MARTA. They are working very closely with ABI and the city of Atlanta. And we'll talk more about the schedule in our last 2 classes. We are somewhat near schedule on the South Side Trail. We're 1 phase behind. There is a piece under construction, but there are pieces not under construction yet. On action plans, we've completed plans for affordable housing, for economic development, and for a master plan. For sustainability, we're somewhat near schedule. It just hadn't been published yet. And here is the last page of all of these kind of numbers. On parkland control, we've got 55% of what we need to have during 56% of the project. So we're right on schedule. We're behind schedule on the brownfield remediation. 36% has been done during 56% of the project. We are ahead of schedule on permanent jobs. We've got 18,700 public permanent jobs created, 62%, when we've only had 56% of the project. Construction jobs, we're at almost 91% of the number of construction jobs that last at least a year during just 56% of the project. We're ahead of schedule on economic development. We've got 62 billion of the $10 billion target. So 62% during 56% of the project. And our return on investment, what we've spent in terms of the infrastructure of the Beltline, the private developers around the Beltline have put in 6.2 billion, and the return on investment is for every $1 on the Beltline, private developers have spent over $10 in the Beltline planning area. We're on schedule for housing development in the TAD. For affordable housing, we're behind schedule. When we did the report, we were at almost 36% during 56% of the project. Now we're at about 38%. And we're going to talk about that in great detail in a couple of weeks. Okay, this is something I just wanted to let you know is available. My software is so old that I can't put a link down here and click on it and take you to the website. So I had to do a screenshot, but this has just been made available in the last few months on the Beltline website. It's called the Atlanta Beltline Data Explorer, and you can go in and do all kinds of clicking on all of these little boxes to get different kinds of data, and it shows the data around the Beltline. And what this shows is the change in median household income from 2000 to 2018, not adjusted for inflation, in Beltline subareas. The highest increase in median income has been in Southeast, down in the area that Peggy is probably in. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that Peggy's income has increased that much.
Hey, Lucy,
but that's the part of town where median income has increased the most. The next part is the north.
Hang on a second, Lucy. Hang on one second. What's the matter,
Sure.
Tony?
Can we access through this information through beltline.org?
Yes, and I'm going to tell you how in just a minute. The northeast part has been the next highest income growth. Northwest and directly west are the next to the lowest income growth. And this south and southwest and this section of west is the lowest. Now, the way you get to this, if you want to play around with this, is that you go to beltline.org and you'll see a little magnifying glass. It's not really a magnifying glass. It's a drawing of a spyglass for a search engine.
Right, right.
And you click on the little magnifying glass and it will bring up a field that you can type in what you're searching for. type in Data Explorer and then hit enter. So search Data Explorer, hit enter. And when you do that, it should bring you up the Data Explorer or an article about the Data Explorer that has a link that you click on to get to it, as well as a link to several pages of instructions about how you can use it.
Yeah, Lucy, I got it, and I will put it up on the event page for this class.
Okay, great.
So the link will be there and they can find their way. I'll just put the link right up.
Okay. Well, this is really to be used to establish neighborhood level baselines on things such as income, race, employment, housing tenure, and it's going to provide a snapshot of demographic and socioeconomic conditions as of today, 15 years into the 25-year lifespan, and it will get updated each time we have new data available. They're using the Census Bureau's American Community Survey and longitudinal employer household dynamics. I had to write that down and read it off to you. There's no way I could remember that. And Atlanta Police Department statistics, so you can look at crime rates. Okay, I need to speed up. Trail progress to date. This is a map. Whoops. Well, sometimes my mouse just goes crazy. This is a map that shows the progress to date on trails. And what is in green is complete, paved, and open. And there are three sections: the East Side Trail, the West Side Trail, and the North Side Trail. Now, the things in orange are under construction, and there are four things under construction: the Northeast Trail here, an interim trail over I-20 to connect up at Memorial Drive and Glenwood, about 0.8 of a mile of the South Side Trail from about 75, 85 over to where the University Avenue dead ends. And this is a spur trail that is being built. Right now, there are 11 miles of the 33 miles complete and paved, but there are 4 miles of interim trails, so there are 15 miles of the 33 miles open to use. There's 1.5 miles under construction, and of the main corridor, excuse me, and over 1.5 miles of this spur trail. Now, we're going to talk about the Northeast Trail. 2 more quick slides, and then we'll do questions. This is where Georgia Power had to replace utility lines north of Ansley Mall, and it was inland owned by the Beltline. The utility lines were on the edge of the corridor. So ABI negotiated with Georgia Power to let them go first and replace the transmission lines, as long as they would pay for and pave that section of the trail. So that's a way that money that was never imagined has come in to pave about 0.8 of a mile of the trail. The trail pour is complete from the Buford Springs connector to Montgomery Ferry Road. All the grading, drainage, and ductwork is complete. The walls and the ramp to Montgomery Ferry are 75% complete, and they're in the process of doing all the plantings. This is a picture of the stairs going and the ramp from Montgomery Ferry going down into this area. This is the section that is north of that. There's actually both a north and a south. This first section is from Mason Street up to Marta at Lindbergh. And the concept design is in review with the goal of identifying a preferred alternative for that section between the Buford Spring Connector and Lindbergh Marta. It's really hard in that area to figure out exactly where you're going to put things because there's so much rail and streets already. It will include a connection to Path 400, and they're working through the proposed route with Norfolk Southern Railway that has freight rail lines that still go through there. So this is what the final build out will include. So that's the progress on the Northeast Trail. We'll pick back up next week with the East Side Trail progress, and we'll go all the way around, and then we'll talk about parks. So let's open it up, Peggy, for questions. I'll quit sharing the screen here.
I think sometimes people have a tendency to think this isn't near them. Let me see if I can say that better. Everybody knows that I know it's near me, but sometimes I think I'm going to take that map, okay, that link to the map that's on our very first page of this class, and I'm going to put it on every page. So that every week when you go to look at what's coming, or if you go to look at this, the recording of this class or whatever, you can click on that map, because Lucy just talked about trails that are, for those of you in Buckhead and in Vinings, I mean, those trails are not, it's not like it's somewhere far away that you'll never take advantage of.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes even over on the east side in the new development, Gene, that's in that area in terms of DeKalb, and it's closer to you than you think, is what I kept thinking the whole time that I was listening to Lucy. And I know it's probably because I believe in this concept, so I confess that bias, but I also want you to understand where it is and that it has the capacity to improve your quality of life, not just me in Atlanta.
And that's why I try, when I talk about things like that, to say, this is north of Ansley Mall.
I know.
Or, this is near the Buford Spring Connector.
When you started talking about that, I went, guys, you know where that is.
So if you don't live in Northeast Atlanta, you may not know where Ansley Mall is or where the Buford Spring Connector is. But if you do live in that area, that means something to you, and you can see how close the Beltline is to those areas. And I'll try to do that for Southeast, South, West, Northwest, as we go around and talk about the different things.
You're doing great, Lucy. I just think sometimes we just don't. Go ahead, Tony. You had a question.
Lucy, the spur that you mentioned on the west side there, that long spur, where is that dead end in town?
At the Mercedes-Benz Stadium.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And it will eventually go all the way to Centennial Olympic Park.
Right.
All right.
It's an amazing spur. That's awesome.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about that in more detail next week.
Good.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mary.
I've been using the map, but the different trail area names don't really appear on the map.
No, they don't.
Say, what it's called. That would help to have that added. Maybe somebody could put it in by hand. And the other thing, are you going to talk about all the trails that connect, spurs or whatever they're called by the Path Foundation? Because we're about to have a big completed trail out here on the north side with the the North Side Drive area.
I'm not going to talk about all of them that the Path Foundation is working on, because I just don't have time and still be able to cover everything that the Beltline is doing. But wherever the Path Foundation is building something that's going to connect to the Beltline, I will talk about that.
Yeah. It's good.
Yeah,
Thank you.
of course, Path has been around, what, since the 90s, I think.
Yeah, since 1992 or
Yeah,
three.
right. I remember that they originally started with rail to trails that we were talking about last week,
Mhm.
because the Silver Comet Trail, they got involved in that, from what I understand. And there's some trails that they have put in right here in Vinings that theoretically supposed to connect the Silver Comet to this Beltline that we're talking about now at some point. I don't know where.
The plan is that you
Well-
would eventually be able to start out on a bicycle if you were a bike rider and go 5 miles around the Stone Mountain Trail,
Okay.
then
so
come
now-
in east from Stone Mountain on path trails through Decatur and to the east side of the Beltline, go 22 miles all the way around the Beltline, connect up on the west side with the Silver Comet Trail, and go all the way to Alabama.
Actually, to Birmingham, it's supposed to go.
Well, then to Birmingham. So yes, the long-term plans are for all of these trails to
Yeah.
connect up. And the Beltline would be kind of like the hub of the wagon wheel, and all those other trails would be the spokes going out from the wagon wheel.
Our grandchildren are going to take have actual use of all of this. We might
My
not be-
grandchildren are already using it.
Yeah, no, I mean like to ride your bike from Stone Mountain to Birmingham or something.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, and some of us
Actually,
who are- go
my
ahead.
first grandson was born the same month that they opened the 2.25 miles of the East Side Trail near my house.
Okay.
So we had my grandson out in a stroller on the Beltline when he was 2 weeks old.
There you go.
Well, I keep talking about that electric bicycle, and I keep worrying that
Yeah.
I'm going to kill myself on an electric bicycle. But the only way I'll manage it is with that. But that's okay. I'm looking for that. I
might consider that. I know somebody who works for the Atlanta Beltline Partnership who lives in a condo near the East Side Trail, and he works in the partnership offices off the East Side Trail. So he bought an electric bicycle and he gets around. He doesn't own a car. He gets around town on his electric bike.
I think it makes sense to me. Those of us in my neighborhood are pretty excited about the SSD.
Yes.
We truly do believe that there are some developers and other business folk who are making out like bandits along
Yes.
the Beltline,
Yes.
sorry. And
Yes.
it makes sense for them to kick back into this project.
Yes.
So we're definitely behind that one, I can tell you. Even the small ones who were the smaller businesses who decided to raise a ruckus when it first came out. Come on, guys. If you don't have a good trail, ain't nobody going to come down there and stop at your coffee shop for coffee.
That's for sure.
So,
Yeah.
you're building your own business this way. I mean, it's so hard for us to understand the investment in public also benefits the private,
Yes.
and that's the part that, anyway, I'll be quiet now.
Well, that raises something that I usually say on the bus tour that I can wrap up with. Occasionally, when I talk about those numbers about how much everything's going to cost, somebody from somewhere on the bus will holler out, "We can't afford to do that."
We can't.
And the first time that happened, I was kind of taken aback, and it took me a few seconds, but my comeback was, we can't afford not to do that. Because if we let our inner city decay instead of be built up to be a vibrant downtown, a vibrant neighborhoods in town, then what we're going to have is a decaying city surrounded by a donut of suburbs. And that's not good for the city or those suburbs. So we can't afford not to do it. I mean, if we're getting a 10-to-1 return on investment, I wish I could get a 10-to-1 return on my investments.
Yeah, buy
So-
Bitcoin.
We can't afford not to do this.
Yep, for sure. Lucy, you're wonderful. This is
Yeah.
really, I live on it, and I'm learning more and more and more. I will put up the link to that interactive page, because it really is interesting to look at the socioeconomic impact in different areas of the city. So
You might want to put up the link to the instructions on how to use it also.
Yep, I saw that there, and I thought I would do both. Yep.
Okay, great. That would be wonderful. Well, I am just amazed at all of y'all's attention to this and your good questions. I'm just thrilled that this is another, audience of people who are this interested in the Beltline.
Yep, we are indeed. Thank you, ma'am. We really, really
Oh.
appreciate you.
You're very welcome, and I'll see you next week, and we'll finish talking about trails and parks.
I will be here.
Okay.
All right, hon.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Amy. Amy sent us a message.